You've got ideas, you've got ambition, you've got no time, or so you think. I'm Marissa Lonick, and I help busy moms with big dreams and no time. Join me each week as I dive into time management strategies, goal setting and achieving framework, and inspiring guests who are juggling mom life, work life, fill in the blank life. Dreams don't work unless you do, and just because you're a mom doesn't mean you can't still make it happen, whatever it means to you. Welcome to the Mama Work It podcast. Hey, mama friends. Welcome back to another fantastic episode of the Mama Work It podcast. So glad you're here. If you're new in town, I'm Marissa Lonick, your working mom bestie, your host, your voice of reason. No, I'm kidding. But in all seriousness, I do hope you find this show to be helpful in your working mom juggle. And today on the show, we're talking all about actually podcasts, right? So I brought on the show no one other than Juliana Barbati to talk to us about all about this awesome topic. Juliana is a dynamic podcast strategist, consultant, and owner of a top boutique podcast production agency. Her specialties include marketing, SEO, copywriting, and monetization, all of which allow her to help entrepreneurs elevate their voices and spread their inspiring messages. But Juliana's passion goes beyond business. Juliana is deeply passionate about her faith and her family. In her free time, Juliana enjoys spending time in her tropical Central American paradise where she lives with her husband and two, soon to be three, homeschooled littles. Juliana, thank you so much for being here.
Marissa, thank you for having me. I'm so excited to come in and pour into your audience.
Yeah, me too. Sometimes I feel like I've been on this podcast journey for a while now. I started this show in early 2021, and I forget some of the doubts and feelings and questions I had before I launched this. So I'm so excited to ask you and obviously learn from your expertise in the podcasting world, because I know so many of our listeners may be contemplating thinking about diving into podcasting and maybe just aren't sure of some things, or are feeling a little bit of fear, or are just making excuses, or whatever is getting in the way. So before we dive into this awesome topic, I would love for you to just tell us a little bit more about you, about your journey as a working mom, as a homeschool mom, as a podcast boutique owner, podcast agency owner. Tell us all the things.
Yes. Okay. So, my journey. So, after I became a mom, I was done with the workforce, right? Like, my husband and I had agreed pretty early on that I was going to stay home with the babies and he was going to go out and earn the money. And that was all good and great until I was like, okay, there's more that I need to do, because obviously being in one income, and I'm a hippie, and the thing about us hippies is that it's an expensive lifestyle to buy organic everything and to do the non-toxic living. And I was like, okay, this has got to change. So in the beginning of my journey, I was just like, what can I do? And at that time, it was like circa 2015, and I had just really, you know, I guess I was awakened to the world of influencer marketing and influencer things. And I was like, I am going to be a YouTuber and an Instagrammer. And it's going to be great. It's easy. I just have to document my life and make money. Well, it was all good and great, except for it's not my jam. Like, I hate documenting my life. I'm very private and I just feel like I don't have anything interesting to share. So that didn't last very long. So I always had this idea of how can I make money from home? What can I do? And around 2018, so this was early 2018, my husband discovered the world of selling on Amazon. And I was like, tell me more. I don't understand, because I thought that Amazon sells on Amazon, and I didn't really understand that people can own their own shops inside of Amazon. So that started our entrepreneurial journey right then and there. So that's when I started to learn about, online marketing and SEO and copywriting and amazing graphics and branding. So that was the beginning of everything. So my husband and I started an Amazon store. And by this time, I had a 2 year old, a very, very spicy 2 year old, and a newborn. And my husband and I were doing all the things and just trying everything out. And we thought we were going to be so rich from that Amazon store. And we were like, oh my gosh, in like a few months, we're going to be millionaires. And like, lo and behold, that did not happen. It actually took us 2 years to like make the six-figure mark. But when it did happen, it was amazing. It was great. But then it was 2020. And then, like, we all know how that went down, right? So then it was 2020, and I was, I've lived in Florida most of my life. And it felt like the hurricane that you prepare yourself for, but the hurricane never came. And it was just like, what do we do? And it was just like so much anxiety over the virus, whatever. So then, anyway, I was like, okay, there's nothing else to do. Let's start a podcast. And the first idea that I had about starting a podcast, it was going to be about non-toxic living and things like that, because that was my background, being a hippie and all. um, but then, as I started to think about what I really wanted to talk about, I really wanted to talk to moms who wanted to make money from home. And how I had accomplished that finally was through selling on Amazon. And of course, I had made many mistakes along the way, but I felt like I had a shortcut. And then by that point, I had also started an Etsy shop, and my Etsy shop like blew up like very quickly. So I started this podcast, and the beginning of my podcasting journey, it was like I was terrified of it. Talking to a microphone just felt so weird, and I hated my voice. I realized how many times I say like, and I was just shocked. And I really wanted to quit. And it's funny because not long ago, I went back to my very first episode, and I was like, oh my gosh, look at this girl go. Like, I was nervous, and I told everybody how nervous I was. And I guess I had tried to record, and it wasn't recording for the longest time. And I really wanted to quit, but I kept going. But anyway, the journey with podcasting grew because my podcast, I was not a household name. When I started this podcast, I did not have an email list, a social media following, I had nothing. And I launched my podcast to an audience of no one. And still, my podcast was very successful. And I started monetizing it with my services very early on. So came to pass probably around December of 2021 that I just felt like I had so much more to give beyond talking about Etsy and Amazon. And I didn't want to do that anymore. And that's when I shifted. Well, first I had to have a come to Jesus moment, and like take a really good look at my life, and see, okay, what have I done? What have I accomplished? What can I do for other people? And of course, one of those things was the podcast. I had organically grown this podcast, and I was monetizing it. I was supporting my family with it. So I knew very well the pain points podcasters go through. So I was like, okay, let's start this agency. So that was the birth of the agency. Um, the idea started then, and I got my first client in that same month, December 2021. And then the agency started growing word of mouth very organically. And then March 2022 is when I officially started the agency. And I was like, okay, this is what I do now. I separated myself from like the Etsy and the Amazon world, because anytime we're going through a transition, it's like, okay, who am I? Can I do both? Can I do everything? I don't want to disappoint anybody. And what if it fails? Like, it was a lot of mindset work that I needed to do. um but no, the agency has grown ever since, like, without me even like doing much. The agency has always grown. And I know very well the struggles podcasters go through, because whenever I launch a podcast for a client, it's always the same thing. It's always like, but what about my voice, and what am I going to talk about, and are people going to listen, and all of these things. So anybody who's thinking about launching a podcast right now and you're going through those things, you're not alone. We all collectively go through that, those fears.
Yeah. Yeah. It's good to share that because I think we feel really alone when we're contemplating that because we're so inside our head. Um, I want to touch upon another thing you said because I'm an intuitive life and business coach. So I lean a lot on intuition and things like that. And how you said that your podcasting business, you sort of had an identity shift during that time. Like you were doing Amazon, you were doing Etsy, you were even doing your own podcast, promoting your Amazon and Etsy, the building of those things. And then you had a shift where you knew it was time to step into this podcasting agency. And it felt almost effortless that business grew, although it wasn't necessarily effortless for you to step into it. But I feel like when something is intuitively right for you, when you are called to do something different or something new, or quit your job or start a new job or start a business or start a podcast or whatever your intuition is nudging you to do, even if it feels hard in some ways, because things are hard in life, like let's just get real, life's not always rainbows and butterflies. Things align when they're meant to align. And that was proven in just the ability for that to grow kind of. I'm not saying you didn't do work to make it grow, but just how it grew almost like you said, in this effortless way.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And let me just tell you that, from that period from December up until March when I made the decision, I really was struggling because, I had the business that was working, right? Like being an Etsy coach, an e-commerce coach was working and was bringing money in. And yeah, the agency was growing, but what if it was just a fluke? What if it didn't work? What if I went all in and nothing? Like what if, in the e-commerce world, I was really 3 feet away from gold and like it could have really blown up that business, So I had all of these fears. And I think I was in the shower one day and it was just like, no, like this business is growing. And I think, like all the signs are here. Go all in. You have nothing to fear. You just need to trust and surrender. And it was a process, like, if we're being honest, it was over 3 months of sitting in this discomfort and being in fear and wondering how can I combine both. Like in my world, if anybody could combine podcast marketing with, e-commerce, it was going to be me. But like, let's face it, how do you even promote yourself with like doing all these things? So really, when I went all in, I saw so many blessings, obviously, So yes,
Mm-hmm.
even though this business was growing, I still had a lot of internal work that I needed to do in order for me to really, go all in and accept that it was working and that it was working well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I love that you said that this sort of hit you in the shower. Juliana, I feel like the shower is like the space I always get the downloads, the ideas, the clarity, the vision, all the things. If you're listening and you have not tapped into like the intuitive shower experience, you need to. I got the name of my first book in the shower. Like I'm getting nudges all the time in the shower. Like I don't know if it's the embodiment of the hot water, the quiet time, the solo time if you're a mom, but shower is a powerful place.
Yes, it really is.
Mhm.
It's amazing how many aha moments I've had in the shower too. And it's funny because now I feel like I have shifted from the shower to like when I wake up, like the first thought that I have will be something that's an idea that it's like it's a Holy Spirit idea. I'm like, where did this idea come from? But like now it's shifted from the shower to like the first minute when I wake up and it's like, whoa, that's such a great idea. I need to write it down really quickly. So yeah, but
Yeah.
yeah, don't the shower, yes please. And I know for moms
Don't.
it can be, especially for mom of littles, taking a shower is like, what are you talking about, women? But trust me, trust me, when you can disconnect and
Yes.
just be present in the shower, the ideas just flow. It's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. We're not talking about like the 30-second showers while the baby's crying outside. We're
Yeah.
talking about like a nice shower that you can take maybe once everyone's asleep for the night or like before everyone wakes up in the morning, like those kind of showers.
Yeah.
Okay. But that's not what this episode's about. Anyway, okay. So, Juliana, who should start a podcast in your opinion? Lots of listeners out there. Maybe somebody who's got that little like twinkle, sparkle idea of starting a podcast, but like, why me? Should I start a podcast? Who should do it?
Okay, that is such a great question, Marissa. So, first of all, you need to be a person who can see long term, and you are somebody who commits and goes all in. And the reason why I say that is because most podcasters don't get past episode number 7. So what happens is they get super
Mm,
excited and they'll go out and buy the microphone. They'll build themselves a little studio in their basement, and they're all worried about the equipment and how do I record and which software and all these things. And they spend all this money and time and effort into like the technical side of podcasting. And then they launched this thing, and it's crickets. And then they quit because it wasn't what they thought it was going to be. And here's the thing, like anything else in the world, a podcast is not, your overnight success. It's not your ticket to overnight success. You need to put time and effort into podcasting. So to give you more technical understanding, so Apple probably won't start to categorize you and put you into like this different buckets until you're 3 months in, and that's assuming that you're SEO optimizing your podcast correctly, right? So if we know from looking at data that Apple alone is taking 3 months to put you in a certain category and then push you out to podcast listeners who are listening to the same kind of podcast, well, you need to commit to at least three to podcasting for at least 3 months. But if I'm being super honest, you need to go into it with the idea that you're going to do it for at least 1 year. And honestly, there are going to be times where you feel like quitting, but like, what if I had quit my podcast a year in? I wouldn't be sitting on the amazing business that I have today, right? So, like, I am a podcaster. This is what I do. Another kind of person that should be looking into podcasting is the person who doesn't love social media, is the person who doesn't have time to be doing all the things on social, is the person who doesn't want to create reels every single day of her life or TikToks or whatever. It's for the person who wants to sit down and have, talking to the microphone for 10, 15, 20 minutes every single week and just know that her content will be evergreen, that it'll always reach the right person. And that is who the podcast's for. Um, if you're somebody who just needs that rush, right? Like you make a post and you get the likes and you get the comments and you just need the immediate feedback, you're probably going to hate podcasting, because podcasting, the people who listen to podcasts are lurkers. So, like, for example, Marissa, I know you know how difficult it is to get reviews on a podcast, right? Just because
Yes.
we all lurk around. So, but if we know anything about business, is that the lurkers are the buyers. It's the people who have been like, that you didn't even know was in your audience. Those are the people that go and buy things from you when you launch something. It's not the cheerleaders for their, leaving hearts and comments in every post. It's the lurkers that make us money, which is why podcasting is great. But yes, if you need that like instant feedback and that rush, you're not going to get that from a podcast. It's much more subtle. It's, you will get emails from people saying, hey, I loved today's episode, or a DM, but it's not going to be, it's just not also the nature of the platform, right? Like every platform has like an end goal. And with the podcast, that's just not part of that.
Yeah, it's not like an immediate gratification thing, but I do think it has like a more long-term positive effect, especially like if your show is about something positive, right? So,
Yes, which is why it's important to have, that long-term vision for your podcast and not go into it thinking, "Oh, I'm just going to see what happens." Because I think for me, one of the reasons why I was so successful in my own podcasting journey is because from the get-go, I just decided that my podcast was going to be successful, that I was not going to be on social media, that I was not going to be doing all the things. I was just going to podcast. So, I am a podcaster through and through. Now, it's 2024, and I am now in a space in my business where, I have started it, I have grown it. Now I'm ready to scale. And because I'm ready to scale, and because I have a team that supports me, I am now at a phase where I'm like, okay, team, here's my vision, go ahead and execute on it. I want you to recycle this podcast content, and you go ahead and post everything everywhere on social media, and do all of that. So we have just started doing Instagram and LinkedIn, and I don't know, I might be on TikTok, I'm not sure, because my team is handling that, but that's because of where I am in my journey right now. Because I'll tell you, Marissa, if I was trying to grow a podcast and a TikTok and an Instagram and a LinkedIn and all the things back when I started, I would have given up, right? But because I focused on the podcast and I went all in on the podcast, I had growth fairly quickly. And I went against the grain, because everybody will tell you how much you need social media. And I'm like, I just have my podcast and we're doing good.
mhm.
So,
Mhm.
but yes, patience is part of the game. 100%.
Yeah. Yeah. And when you say that, you mean you focused on, because when you're marketing a podcast without social media, you're really focused on the show notes, the SEO, right? The titles of the episodes, the graphics of the cover art and things like that. So those are the type of things that you were really focused on perfecting. Am I understanding correctly?
100%. So, really understanding, first of all, who my episode is for and tailoring it for her, right? So, like, let's use in the beginning of my journey, I was talking to moms who were selling on Etsy or selling on Amazon. I made my episodes short and sweet and very tactical, but also not overwhelming. And I had women who would message me and say, I have a notebook dedicated to your show and I'm taking notes. I'm learning so much. I'm implementing what you say. So I would hold nothing back. I was like a very actionable podcast, but also not trying to solve everybody's problem in one episode. So my episodes were always like 20 minutes long the most. And
Mm-hmm.
I was always very vulnerable, very laid back with my approach. I didn't make the show about me. I shared pieces of me in the episode. I wanted to be relatable, but I wasn't, sitting over here talking about, I went out to Whole Foods last week and this is what I got and you must go and get this thing too, because then it's like, why are you telling me this? I'm here for e-com tips and advice.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
the other thing that I did, which is the bread and butter of our agency, is SEO. So the podcast app is a search engine. So you need to treat it as such. So what I see people do is that they'll have this really amazing podcast, but then the title of their podcast episode is something very fluffy and it's something very creative. It might be inspiring, but what do you do when you need something and you go to Google? You're very direct, right? Like you're very matter of fact. No matter how creative you are and how much you love uh language that speaks to your heart, you go to Google and you're like, how to do XYZ. It's very basic. And I thought about, okay, how is my person going to Google right now and searching for this thing? And I would make that my episode title. And
Mm-hmm.
because I focused on that so much, I organically grew because I was being very strategic, right? So when you're not leveraging other platforms, right? Like I wasn't, you have to become very mindful about what it is that you're doing. And I'm all about working smart, not hard. So I love SEO optimizing anything because I know the longevity that that brings. But while the podcast app is a search engine, like Google is a search engine, it does not take years for you to rank, right? So it's not like YouTube, for example, that it takes you a while to start having a YouTube channel that starts to rank and YouTube starts to push it out. That happens at the 3 month mark, assuming that you are doing things correctly, that you are optimizing your podcast and things like that. So yes, if the world of SEO is something that intimidates you, don't let it, because it's so much easier on a podcast, because there are very few places for you to put your keywords and things like that, and it's very matter of fact. And while there is an algorithm, it's not an ever-changing algorithm like social media is, for example, that it's like every 5 minutes, like, what are we doing now? Are we doing hashtags? Are we not? How long is this short supposed to be? I don't know. It's very straightforward. But yes,
Mm-hmm.
focusing in the SEO on your podcast, it's going to be key for you to having a really successful show that grows.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right, I want to switch gears a little bit and I want to talk about the monetization piece of podcasts, okay? Because I feel like a lot of podcasters out there, especially new podcasters, they're spending more than they're making for
Mhm.
sure,
Yeah.
right? So tell us, like, how can you monetize a podcast? What are some of your best tips with this? What have you done? What do you recommend your clients do? I'm so curious.
Yes. So let's first debunk the myth that the only way they can monetize a podcast is through sponsors, because you don't have to wait until that point. And also, the other thing about sponsorships that nobody talks about is that they literally pay you pennies per download, which means, let's
Yes.
say your show has 1,000 downloads, and if they're paying you like 5 cents, I cannot do math, but I think that's like $20. Like, it's nothing, it's like literally nothing. So the way that I have monetized my show from very early on. So I started podcasting May of 2020, and then August of 2020, that's when I started promoting my offers. And back then it was coaching. And that's when I made my first dollar podcasting. So I highly recommend that you monetize your podcast with your own products and services. So if you're a coach, offer your coaching, offer your programs, offer the things that you have, or maybe if you have, like a journal that you created or like a template for something, monetize with that. And don't create an ad for the things that you are promoting yourself, that you created yourself, right? Because that is something we can do with sponsorships, that we can have like a little ad break with the jingle and all that. But when you are talking about, come work with me, like actually just have an organic conversation like you would with somebody, because when you do have those ad breaks in a podcast, it can really break somebody's attention. Like you're listening, you're taking notes, and all of a sudden there's a commercial. You're like, oh man, like what happened? So just organically talk about your offers, and that's what I did, and that's how I teach my clients to do. Is just organically talk about your offers, promote your offers. Like let's say if you are somebody and you do have an e-commerce store of some sort, use your podcast to promote that store, so you're not going to make a podcast about, like let's say you sell soap on Etsy. You're not going to make a podcast about soap. You're going to make a podcast that is tailored to the woman who's buying your soap, right? So it might be like a self-care podcast, and then you plug in there, by the way, if you're looking for the best handmade, organic, vegan, non-toxic, zero waste soap, you have got to check my shop out. I will leave a link in the show notes, but you're gonna love it. I make it myself, and you go into your little pitch, but use that to promote, your products and your services. That's how you make money podcasting. Now, let's say if you are a newer coach, or you're just like newer in this online space, you're not quite sure yet. Another way that you can monetize is through affiliate links. So you can become affiliate, for somebody else's program or somebody else's product or whatever. And that's also a great way for you to make money in the beginning. Obviously, it may or may not be as much money as if you were doing your own products and services, right? It's going to be a percentage of that, but it's better for you to make a small commission out of something than make no money at all. So that is also a
Mhm.
way that you can, make money from your podcast. And don't sit here and wait for the sponsorships to come in, because they take a while, and you have to have a
Mhm.
lot of downloads for it to make sense for you to have sponsorships on your show. So for some people that could be years. So just
Yeah.
start where you are with your products and services. That's going to be the easiest.
Yeah. Yeah. Such good tips. I think for me, the first year of my podcast, I wasn't offered any sponsorship opportunities. And then after that, now we get them, but in all honesty, we have not had a sponsor yet for the show. I don't know if we ever will. Maybe we will, but yeah, like you said, they're pennies. And maybe it is a product or service that you actually want to promote and you want to have the show like the product or service sponsor your show. And that's great. And that's an opportunity, right? For me personally, when I listen to podcasts, I fast forward all those commercials.
Yes. Which is why
Yeah.
having that organic conversation, like, hey, friend, like, for example, like today we're going to talk about, XYZ. But before you start, did you know that you and I can work together? And if you're struggling with blah, 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 you can come out of this a new person with a plan, and we can tackle that. Whatever, like make your pitch your own, but like just organically talking about it like you would with a friend. Like if you're talking to
Hmm.
a friend and you knew your friend could really benefit from the product or service that you have, you wouldn't be like, hold on, let me get my jingle music out and like change into like the sales persona. You would just talk, so like humanize your podcast, right? Which, in this day and age of AI, everything is AI, and how can we automate everything? Like, how about we become more human and, sell like you like to be sold to, and like nobody likes oh, let me change into the salesperson persona. Like, just have a conversation. You'd be amazed how well those work.
Yeah, I know. Sometimes we overcomplicate something so simple. All right, Juliana, last question on podcasting before we dive into some fun random ones. I'm curious for the person listening right now, maybe you've lit a spark, you've piqued their interest here, they're intrigued. What's the first thing they should do after listening to this episode to get started if they want to start their podcast?
Oh my gosh, I love this question so much, Marissa. So I would say get a piece of paper, very basic. We're not gonna obsess over the microphones or anything. By the way, you can absolutely start your podcast just using your phone. Like you'd be amazed at how amazing your phone is, and just start there. Don't go crazy just yet, okay? But the first thing you should do is get a piece of paper and think about who is this podcast for. This podcast is not for your peers. You're not trying to impress the person next door. You know, you're just trying to connect with the person who is 3, 5 steps behind you. So, for example, let's say it's a woman. Who is she? Is she a mom? What's happening in her life right now? How can you help? So from the get go, having this human first approach to who your person is, that's what we need to understand. So, even thinking about, okay, she's a mom and she works full time and she's driving her kids to school every day, and that ride is 20 minutes long. So, I'm going to make my episode 15, 20 minutes long so she can listen to me while she takes the kids to school. And I'm going to make sure that I'm being super tactical and tangible and all these things. So, really thinking about who your person is and how you can help. And I know we live in a world and nobody likes to talk about pain points, but like you said earlier, like, yes, life is hard and we do have pain, we do have pain points. So, like, list out what are her pain points and then making episodes to help her, that give her a solution, even if it's a quick term solution. It's okay. Like, she just needs something right now. So thinking about her or him or whoever it is that you're helping, and we don't have to change anybody's life completely in one episode. We're going to podcast forever and ever. So we have other opportunities, right? So every episode should be like a micro breakthrough, a little thing that helps them just get, one step closer to their desired goal. So we don't have to solve all the problems in one sitting. Just do one thing, right? Like we're just trying to help them become like 1% better. That's it. And you're going to be surprised at how much content you're going to come up with, because a lot of people tend to overcomplicate this, and they think that when they start to podcast they need to become a motivational speaker, and they're thinking that they're creating this podcast for the peers. And it's like, no, you're creating this podcast for the person who's 3 steps behind you, and you're just helping her out. Like, hey girl, like, listen, stop walking, get in the car, I can get you there faster. That's all you're doing, with the kind of mindset. And I'm sure you can tell I have this very much this hey girl, hey kind of vibe. Like, I just want to help you. Come in here. Let's do this together. And that's how I approach, anybody who's trying to start a new podcast. It's like, okay, let's just simplify this. And this was a great question that I actually heard Tim Ferriss talk about. I think it might have been his TED talk, that he said, if this were easy, what would it look like? Because we tend to overcomplicate everything. So your
I
first
love
step, like
that.
I said, is not to look for the fanciest microphone. Your first step is to think about, who is this podcast for? That's it.
I love that advice. Guys, isn't Juliana so approachable? She's like, you can sit here. Let me tell you all the things. I love it.
Yeah, well, I try.
Yeah. All right. Well, because we like to keep these episodes on or around 30 minutes, we're going to dive really quick into a lightning round where we ask you some random, just for fun type questions, just so our listeners can get to know you a little bit more personally. Are you ready?
Oh my gosh, I'm ready.
Okay, here we go. What book are you reading right now?
Okay. So I am actually reading the Bible. I started doing like a Bible in a year plan, and I'm like, I'm such an overachiever. I'm like, I am like 3 weeks ahead the plan. But yes, I'm doing a Bible in a year plan, and I'm super excited, like, just to dive in and to read things and to understand, and I'm a geek, as you can tell. So yes, I'm loving
No,
that.
that's amazing. What a great goal. Okay, yes. If you could go on vacation tomorrow anywhere in the world, where would it be and why?
Oh my gosh, I would go to Rome. So my husband is from Rome, Italy, and I actually met him while backpacking in Italy, in Rome. So Rome is a special place, and my mother-in-law obviously lives in Rome, so I could leave the kids with her and just get lost in the city. And it's like could it get any better, right? Like great food. My mother-in-law is in there, an amazing place. So sign me up. Rome it is.
I love that. Rome is actually my favorite city in the whole world. I
Yes,
love it.
it's
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
good.
And I love that you've thought about like your childcare plans and everything with this trip.
Oh yeah, because the kids are not coming, right? Well, the kids are coming, but like mama needs a break, so I'm thinking about
Yes.
myself.
Yes, 100%. All right, last question. What if you could only eat one food for the rest of your life? What would it be? Calories don't count.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Okay. That would have to be gnocchi. My mother-in-law again makes the best gnocchi. I'm just such a sucker, like potatoes and tomatoes given to me all day long. So yes, oh
Yes.
gosh. And I'm pregnant right now and I'm so craving it. I cannot wait for my mother-in-law to come and visit and make me like a big plate of gnocchi so I can just dive in and tell the world, hey, listen, I'm pregnant. I can do it.
Gnocchi all day, every day, pregnant
Yes.
or not. Go
Yes.
for it. Yes. All right, Juliana, tell our listeners where they can find you.
Okay, my loves. So you can find me in my own podcast. So my podcast is called Organic Marketing Simplified. So if you have a podcast in your heart and you need to get it out, that's the place that you want to go into. And also tons of other tips in there, everything business. And of course, if you love to organically grow your business, that's the place you want to hang out. And then there's also my website, julianabarbati.com. And I just started becoming more active on Instagram. Like right now, I like literally just opened up my account. So it's a brand new account, but it's Juliana Barbati _. So you can come hang out with me there too.
So, guys, give her a follow. Let's help her grow her account, which I'm sure will grow knowing you and your skill set, but doesn't hurt to ask, right?
Yes.
All right, Juliana, thank you again for being a guest and sharing all this wisdom and insight. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Marissa.
You've been listening to the Mama Work It podcast. I hope you've enjoyed this episode and would love if you could take a quick minute to leave me a review on whichever platform you're listening from, and maybe even send a note to a fellow mama friend recommending it. Reviews and recs help this podcast grow and reach more like-minded, awesome moms. And if you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click that button so we can stay in touch, girl. By the way, if you haven't checked out the Mama Work It website, please do. There are lots of free resources and great articles there that can help you with the juggle of work life, mom life, wife life, fill in the blank life. So head on over. Thanks again for being part of the tribe. I'll see you soon, but in the meantime, keep on working it, mama.